My name is Evelyn Carter, and for most of my life, I wore a badge and a uniform. 30 years in the courthouse taught me how to keep my voice steady when others broke down, how to read lies in the twitch of an eye, and how to stand tall even when I felt small inside. But nothing, no late-night arrest, no shouting match in a courtroom, prepared me for the sound that shook my house at 2 a.m. It wasn't a polite knock. It was frantic, uneven, desperate. I pulled my robe tighter and hurried to the door, my heart drumming with that old instinct I thought I'd left behind with retirement. When I opened it, my daughter Claire stumbled into the light of the hallway. Her face was pale, her hair wild as if she had been running her hands through it for hours. "Mom," she whispered, and then the words tumbled out of her, broken and raw. "He's gone. Daniel took everything. The accounts are empty." Her hands shook as she held up a crumpled note. I didn't need to read the words to know the kind of cruelty written there. I saw it in her eyes, the humiliation, the disbelief, the hollow terror of realizing the man she trusted had vanished with someone else and left her standing in the ruins. In that instant, my instincts returned like muscle memory. I didn't let her collapse on the floor, though every part of me wanted to cradle her like the child she used to be. Instead, I steadied her shoulders, guided her to the kitchen table, and forced myself to keep my voice even. "We'll handle this, Claire," I said. "Sit down, breathe. I need you with me." I walked into the back room and opened the closet where my old uniform hung, pressed and ready. I slipped it on, not because I still had authority, but because I needed the weight of it, the reminder that I wasn't powerless. When I looked at myself in the mirror, I saw more than a retired bailiff. I saw a mother preparing for battle, and that was the moment I knew. This wasn't just a family crisis. It was a fight, and we had 48 hours to strike back before Daniel disappeared for good. Claire sat at the kitchen table with her arms wrapped around herself as if holding her ribs together. The note lay between us, a smear of ink where her tears had soaked through the paper. I glanced at it only once, enough to see Daniel's careless scrawl, a few cold sentences about needing freedom and starting fresh. He hadn't even bothered to sign his name. The kettle hissed on the stove. I set 2 mugs on the counter, not because tea could solve anything, but because routine steadies the hands when the mind wants to break. Claire's breath hitched, sharp and uneven. She pressed the heels of her palms against her eyes. "He drained everything." "Mom," she said, her voice cracking. "The savings, the checking, even the college fund, it's all gone. I logged in, and there was nothing but zeros. Nothing." I slid a mug toward her and sat down opposite. "Listen to me. He may think he's vanished, but paper always leaves a trail. People like Daniel believe they're clever, but greed is sloppy. He left signs, and we're going to follow them." She lifted her eyes, red and swollen. "I can't face this. Everyone's going to know I was fooled. You're not the first woman to be deceived, and you won't be the last," I said gently. "Shame belongs to him, not to you." Outside, the wind rattled the branches against the windows. I pulled a small folder from the drawer, a folder I had kept for years, labeled Emergency. Claire's gaze followed as I opened it. Inside were blank forms, lists of numbers for banks, attorneys, and contacts who owed me favors from my courthouse days. Her voice was barely audible. "You planned for this?" "I planned for the worst," I answered. "And now it's here." Claire drew a shaky breath, her fingers brushing the edges of the folder. For the first time since she walked in, she looked at me not only as her mother, but as someone who could fight beside her. We sat in silence for a long moment, the folder open like a loaded weapon between us. Then I said, "At dawn, we move. Tonight, We gather every scrap of proof he left behind. The house felt colder than it should have at that hour, as though the betrayal had seeped into the walls. Claire followed me into the study, her steps dragging, her shoulders sagging beneath an invisible weight. I flicked on the desk lamp, the yellow light spilling over stacks of old files and a dusty typewriter I hadn't touched in years. "Start with his computer," I said. "Passwords, emails, anything that shows where he's been moving money." Her fingers trembled as she typed. But she knew the routines. Daniel had insisted she memorize every login for emergencies, though clearly he never expected her to use them against him. I watched her face tighten as the bank page loaded. "Transfers," she whispered. "3 in the last week. Offshore. He wired money to some account in Nassau." I noted the times, the amounts, the routing numbers. Each figure was another nail in his coffin. Claire's voice broke again. "He planned this for months while I was talking about holidays and asking him if he wanted a bigger house. He was already gone." I wanted to tell her not to think that way, but lies must be cut clean, not dulled with comfort. "Yes, he planned it. And now we plan better." I opened a locked drawer and pulled out a flash drive, plugging it into the computer. Every transfer, every suspicious email, every receipt, we copied it all. The hum of the machine filled the silence like a metronome counting down. At one point, Claire leaned back, pressing her fists against her eyes. I should have seen it. He always rushed me to sign papers. He hated when I asked about the accounts. I touched her hand, firm but steady. Those weren't mistakes, Claire. They were red flags. Now they're evidence. By dawn, the drive was heavy with data, and a small stack of files lay neatly clipped on the desk. The first bird stirred outside, unaware that a war had already begun inside our walls. I closed the folder, slid the flash drive into my pocket, and met my daughter's exhausted gaze. "Next step," I told her. "We take this to someone who knows how to use it." By the time the city began to stir, we were already standing outside the office of a man I trusted more than most, Robert Hayes, an attorney I'd known since my courthouse days. His windows glowed against the gray morning, and when he saw me step through the door in my old uniform, his brows rose. "Evelyn," he said, his voice rough from too many late nights, "you wouldn't be here at this hour unless it was bad." "It's worse than bad," I answered, guiding Claire forward. "Daniel emptied every account. He's on the move. We need an emergency freeze." Robert ushered us into his office, the smell of stale coffee and law books filling the air. Claire sat on the edge of the chair, clutching the folder like it might disappear if she let go. Her cheeks were pale, her eyes rimmed red. She spoke barely above a whisper. "He left me with nothing, just debt and silence." Robert studied her for a long moment before turning to me. "You've already gathered evidence?" I placed the flash drive on his desk. "Transfers offshore, Nassau, dates, amounts, routing numbers, enough to start." He slid the drive into his laptop, his eyes narrowing as the screen filled with numbers. "We'll need a temporary injunction to freeze any stateside assets. I'll file today. Banks will fight, but they can't ignore this kind of pattern. And if he's booked international travel, TSA can be alerted." Claire blinked at him, the legal terms tangling in her mind. "I don't understand half of what you just said." I leaned closer, my hand steady on hers. "It means he doesn't get to vanish with everything. It means the law still has teeth." Robert looked between us. "Timing is everything. If he's heading for the islands, we may have less than 2 days." The room fell quiet, the weight of those words pressing down on us. 2 days, 48 hours to stop a man who had been planning for months. Claire swallowed hard. And for the first time, I saw something in her eyes other than despair. It was faint, fragile, but it was resolve. The call came just after noon. Robert's contact at the Department of Justice confirmed what we feared. Daniel had purchased a one-way ticket to Miami with a connection bound for Nassau. The plane was scheduled to leave that evening. Claire's hands flew to her mouth. He's really doing it. He's leaving the country. I steadied my voice. Not if we get there first. We spent the afternoon signing papers, handing over files, pushing the machinery of the law into motion. Every signature felt like striking a match in the dark. By early evening, the injunction had been filed, alerts had gone out, and Robert assured me TSA would be watching. But I still insisted on going to the airport. I couldn't sit at home while my daughter's life slipped through the cracks. Claire clutched my arm as we walked through the terminal. Families bustled with suitcases. Flight attendants hurried past. Announcements echoed overhead. It all felt maddeningly normal, as if the world didn't know a man was about to vanish with stolen futures in his pockets. Then I saw him. Daniel stood near the gate, his hand resting casually on the strap of a sleek leather bag. The woman beside him laughed at something he whispered. To anyone else, they looked like travelers, but I knew better. Claire gasped, her nails digging into my sleeve. "That's her," she hissed. "The woman he left me for." Before I could answer, 2 plainclothes agents moved in. One touched Daniel's shoulder, the other flashed a badge. The scene unfolded in a blur, Daniel stiffening, the woman's startled cry, the snap of handcuffs echoing louder in my ears than the overhead speaker announcing boarding. Claire's breath shuddered out of her. It's real. He's not getting away. I kept my eyes on him as they led him away. For one brief second, Daniel looked back, and our gazes met. No apology, no shame, only the sharp glare of a man who hated being caught. I tightened my grip on Claire's hand. "This isn't the end," I murmured. "It's the beginning." The days after the arrest felt unreal, as though time had slowed just to let the truth bleed out drop by drop. While Daniel sat in a federal holding cell, investigators began peeling back the layers of his life. Each file revealed another betrayal, another lie crafted with precision, another woman left in ruins. Claire and I sat across from Robert as he spread documents over his desk. He tapped one photograph, then another. "This isn't his first marriage," he said. "Not even his second. There are at least 3 separate marriage certificates under different names." Claire's face drained of color. "You mean he was married to someone else while he was with me?" Robert nodded grimly. "To 2 women, at least. Possibly more." Claire pressed her hands to her temples. "God, I thought I was building a life with him. I thought I was safe." I reached across the table, forcing her eyes to meet mine. "You weren't foolish. Claire, you were targeted. He looks for women who trust too deeply, who won't question the paperwork, who believe in vows." Investigators uncovered accounts scattered across states, shell companies with names designed to look legitimate, and debts hidden beneath layers of forged signatures. Every page felt like another knife twisting, not only in Claire, but in the other women whose lives he'd stolen. One afternoon, we were introduced to them. Monica, with her steady gaze that cracked only when she mentioned the mortgage she'd lost. Linda, whose voice shook when she spoke about the retirement fund that had vanished overnight. Their stories mirrored Claire's, each one a variation of the same cruel melody. The room was heavy with grief, but there was something else, too, an undercurrent of recognition. These women were not rivals. They were survivors of the same predator. Claire looked at them, her voice soft but trembling with new steel. He wanted us isolated, ashamed. But together, maybe we're stronger than he ever imagined. I saw it then. the first flicker of transformation. My daughter was no longer just a victim. She was beginning to step into her own power. Our first meeting with Monica and Linda took place in a plain conference room downtown. The walls were beige, the tables scratched from years of use, but to us it felt like standing in a storm shelter after the tornado had passed. Papers were stacked between us, cups of coffee cooling too quickly. At first, no one spoke. Monica kept her arms folded, her eyes sharp as if she were preparing for another blow. Linda twisted a tissue in her hands until it tore into shreds. Claire sat beside me, stiff with unease, her gaze darting between the women who had unknowingly shared her husband. Finally, Monica broke the silence. When I found out about the others, I wanted to hate you. I thought, how could they not see what I didn't? How could they let it happen too? Claire's breath caught, but before she could answer, Linda's voice cracked. I thought the same, until I looked in the mirror and realized I was asking the wrong question. It wasn't about us failing. It was about him hunting. The tension eased, just a fraction. Claire leaned forward, her hands trembling but her voice steady. He fed us the same lies, the promises of security, the quick signatures, the trips we never took. He knew exactly which buttons to push. Monica's hard expression softened, and she exhaled slowly. So we're not fools. We're evidence. That word hung in the air like a lifeline. Evidence. Not shame, not failure. Evidence. Proof of his pattern, his intent, his crimes. I watched my daughter's shoulders square, a quiet determination settling over her. She looked at the women and said, if we work together, we can make sure he never does this to anyone again. We can take back more than just money. We can take back our voices. Linda wiped her eyes and nodded. Monica reached across the table, laying her hand over Claire's. For the first time, they weren't three broken women staring at each other across a divide. They were a united front. And in that moment, I knew Daniel had lost far more than freedom. He had lost control of the silence that once protected him. Weeks turned into months, and the case grew heavier with every new folder dropped on Robert's desk. The prosecutors wanted maximum prison time, but Evelyn, the mother in me, knew that punishment alone wouldn't heal what Daniel had broken. The women needed more than vengeance. They needed restoration. Robert explained the options one evening as we sat around his long oak table. He's facing multiple counts of fraud, identity theft, bigamy. He'll serve time no matter what. But the bigger question is how much of the stolen money we can claw back. Monica's voice was sharp. I don't care if he rots forever. I just want my house back. Linda shook her head. My retirement savings are gone. If we don't get restitution, I can't survive on hope alone. Claire listened quietly, her fingers laced together in her lap. Finally, she lifted her chin. Then we fight for both. We make sure he pays with years of his life and every cent he ever stole. Not just for us, for everyone he might have targeted next. Her words silenced the room. It wasn't the timid voice of the daughter who had collapsed on my doorstep. It was the voice of someone stepping into her own strength. Together, the three women agreed to push for a restitution order alongside the prison sentence. That meant more court appearances, more paperwork, more nights spent combing through bank records until our eyes burned. But slowly, bit by bit, the numbers began to add up. Frozen accounts, hidden properties traced back to Daniel's false names, cars, jewelry, investments, assets clawed back into the light. I watched Claire transform during those weeks. Each hearing she attended, each affidavit she signed, carved away her shame and replaced it with resolve. She was no longer running from the humiliation of betrayal. She was running toward justice, dragging it into the light with her own hands. When she stood before the judge to testify, her voice didn't tremble. He took my trust, but I will not let him take my future. And for the first time, I believed she wasn't just surviving, she was reclaiming. The courthouse was crowded on the morning of sentencing. Reporters hovered outside, cameras poised, eager to capture the downfall of a man who had built his life on lies. Claire walked beside me, her shoulders squared, her hair pulled back tightly as if every strand needed to be in control. She wasn't the broken woman who had stumbled into my house months ago. She looked like someone ready to face the storm. Inside the courtroom, Daniel sat at the defense table in a crisp suit provided by the county. He looked almost unchanged, still the polished smile, still the posture of a man who believed charm could rescue him, but his wrists twitched against the cuffs, and for the first time I noticed the cracks in his performance. The judge read the charges aloud, the words echoing through the chamber: fraud, identity theft, bigamy, wire transfers, conspiracy. Each count was a stone piled onto Daniel's shoulders. Then came the moment for victim statements. Monica went first, her voice steady as she described the foreclosure notice taped to her door. Linda followed, tears streaking her cheeks as she spoke about losing her retirement fund. When Claire stood, silence swept through the room. She walked to the podium, unfolded a single page, then let it tremble in her hand without looking down. Her voice was clear, carrying across the chamber. You didn't just steal money, Daniel. You stole trust. You took my laughter, my sleep, the years I thought were safe. You left me believing I was worthless. But I stand here today to tell you I am not broken. I am not ashamed. And I will not live as your victim any longer. Her words struck harder than any sentence. I saw Daniel's jaw tighten, his smile falter, the charm collapsing under truth. The judge leaned forward, his tone heavy. Mr. Daniels, your pattern of deceit is not only criminal, it is cruel. This court sentences you to 12 years in federal prison and orders restitution to your victims. The gavel came down, final and sharp. Claire closed her eyes, a single tear sliding free, not of grief, but of release. Beside her, I felt my chest swell with something fierce and unshakable. Justice had been spoken, and my daughter had claimed it with her own voice. Life after the verdict didn't snap back to normal, but it began to steady. The storm had passed, leaving wreckage behind, yet also the space to rebuild. Claire no longer walked with her head bowed. She carried herself with quiet certainty, like someone who had looked into the abyss and decided to climb out anyway. In the months that followed, the three women, Claire, Monica, and Linda, stayed in touch. What began as cautious phone calls turned into weekly meetings. One evening, over coffee at my kitchen table, they spoke of creating something lasting out of their pain. Other women need to know the signs, Monica said. If we'd seen them earlier, maybe we wouldn't have lost so much. Linda nodded. We can't get our years back, but maybe we can save someone else's. Claire looked at me then, her eyes shining with a resolve I had never seen before. We should start a foundation, a place women can turn to when they feel that knock on their door, the one I made that night. And so they did. With Robert's guidance, they established the Second Chance Foundation, dedicated to helping victims of romance and financial fraud. They spoke at community centers, churches, and libraries. They built a hotline staffed with volunteers who understood the shame and confusion firsthand. The first time I watched Claire step onto a stage to tell her story, my throat tightened. She spoke not as a victim, but as an advocate. Her voice reached women who shifted uncomfortably in their seats, recognizing fragments of their own lives in her words. I stood in the back, pride swelling in my chest. That night at 2 a.m. had nearly broken us, but it also forged something unshakable. If there's one truth I carry now, it's this: betrayal can hollow you out, but it can also carve space for strength. And if ever another knock comes at my door, I will answer, knowing that justice is not just punishment, it is restoration, and it is hope. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy these family drama and revenge stories, please subscribe and join me for more every day.